Now, in the Yalkut Bi'urim, here on Daf Ayin Daled Amid Aleph, we have a very important discussion in the Yalkut HaBi'urim. And in order to appreciate the Yalkut HaBi'urim, what we should do is go back to the Gemara on Daf Ayin Daled. Just 1 second. Yeah. Now, what we want to look at is a brisa of Rabbi and Rav Yosef. Let's see if we can zoom in on the place. You'll see a Tosas Diramaskel Ister. And if you count down approximately, shall we say, 6 lines down to that Tosfos, and it says the following: Tanu Rav Rav Yosef. The first word in the line is V'Rav Yosef. B'Shar Sifrei de Rav. Minayin. Now watch this language here. Minayin liyom HaKippurim sha'asur berchitza v'sicha v'ne'ilas hasandul b'tavish tashamita Talmud Lomar pasuk in Achrei Mos Shabbos Shabboson hilachem v'inisem es nafshel seichem. Now, what does the Torah mean when it adds the word Shabboson? Shvos. The Torah is adding to that definition of affliction of inui above and beyond achil and shesiyah, and we're deriving from this Shabboson Shvos 4 categories of inui that are prohibited on Yom Kippur, and that adds to the 5th category, which is called achil and shesiyah. He says the following, that from Rashi we get the impression that the Chachamim added 4 categories, just like they did in Shmos, in Malachos. They added certain Malachos that are not included in Malachos Doraisa. In Inui, they did the same exact trick, and they added a broader scoped definition of Inui, adding 4 new categories of Inui above and beyond Achil and Shesiyah, and all these are Osafos Chachamim. These are all Drabanans. The Rosh writes at the beginning of this parak that Hey Inuyim Isuram Midrabanan. Now I'm not sure what he means by Hey Inuyim, but in any event, the Inuyim are Asur Mirabbanan. Kemo Isurei Shvus to Shabbos. So when we derive from Shabbos and Shvos, it means just like the Shvus of Shabbos, which is only the Rabbanan. The Rifa, one of the Baalei Tosfos, brings the Yerushalmi, and the Yerushalmi says that Sicha is Kishtia le'isur avalola onesh. L'yom HaKippurim lo le'isur v'lo le'onesh. Mashma sheb'yom HaKippurim ein Sicha asura midoraisa. Because according to Yerushalmi, on Yom Kippur, we don't have an Isur Sicha, meaning on a Doraisa level, there is no Isur Sicha. Now, from the fact that our Mishnah allows Rechitza in the cases of a Melech and a Kala, that also would seem to indicate that the Inuyim are only Derabbanan. And we allow a woman after birth to wear her leather shoes, even though her life is not in danger. I mean, if her life was in danger, then no one would disagree with this. But once again, it would seem that we're dealing with the Drabon. Omna. Now we get to the dissenting view. Maskonas Aran. The Hei Inuyim Heim Midoraisa. All the Inuyim are Doraisa. B'diek Miloshen Abraisa. The Braisa says, Afal Pisha Amru Osur lo Amru Onish Karis Ela Ala Ocha Mashma Degam Shar Al Koperim Doraisa. The Hevi Shekain Das Harama Perk Alf Bishvisas Osur V'chein Nokat Asma. It's really amazing. I mean, the Gemara that we just saw derives the Inuyim from the extra Chambasam. And now we're saying that according to the whole school of Rishonim, this is all a rabbinic enterprise. It's only the Rabbanon, it's not the Raisa. And yet, we derive from a pasuk in the Torah. And that's why the Ran concludes that all 5 Inuyim are Doraisa. Derived from the pasuk Shabbosam. I would suggest that according to the Rishonim, like Rashi, who assume that the other Inuyim are Rabbanan, the word Shabbos on Shvus means that the Torah is authorizing Chachamim to create these categories. So according to the Ran, once the Torah authorized the Chachamim to add these categories, then it becomes Doraisa. The authorization to expand the definition of Inui itself generates Doraisa. Okay. Gufa, says the Gemara, Chatzi Shir, Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Asur Minator, Reish Lakish Omar, Mutar Minator. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Asur Minator, Kevin Dechazi Litztarufe, Isura Ka'achal. Since if he would add another Chatzi Shir, they would be integrated mitzvah from the Shir Shalom. Is now 2 an Isa Chatzi Shir, is he violating an Isa? He's eating macholas asuros. And Reish Lakish Mutar Minator, Achila Omar Achman of Aleka. Because we have a principle, Ein Achila B'Pachos Mikezayis. But where's the Achila? And if there's no Achila, then it cannot be Midorais. The Tosfos asks, why does Rabbi Yochanan need the svara of Chazi Litztarufe? In the next Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan quotes a brisa, and the brisa derives the Iser Chatzi Shir from Kol Chelef, that the extra word Kol, which is redundant, comes to include even Chatzi Shir. So why does Rabbi Yochanan mention Chazi Litztarufe? So we're going to try to offer 4 answers to Tosfos. One is Tosfos himself, the other is the Ritva, the third is the Meiri, and finally the Achiezer. Tosfos says that the main din and derivation for Chatzi Shir according to Rabbi Yochanan as an Isur Torah is Kol Chelef. The svara of Chazi Litztarufe is going to function in the following way. It's going to convince us that this pasuk Kol Chelev and the derivation for the word Kol is a drasha gemura. It's not an asmachta. The Ritva, on the other hand, says that from the pasuk Kol Chelev, Rabbi Yochanan derives the principle of Chatzi Shir Asur Min HaTorah, But nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan wants to give what we call time of the crop, some sort of logical explanation for the Torah law. V'tama iser hu mishum dechazil tzarufei. And now we have the Meiri. The Meiri writes that Iker Dina Shab Yochel Mitam Dechazil Tzarufei, just the opposite of what we said according to the Bali Atos and the Ritva. The main thrust and source for Rabbi Yochanan's conclusion of Chatzi Shirosim in the Torah is Chazil Tzarufei. Klomar, what does Chazil Tzarufei mean? She'ein hachatzi shir osur mitzad atzmo ela mishum shu ascholas achila. It's not that Rabbi Yochanan holds that the chatzi shir is inherently osur. That's not chazil tzarufei. Chazil tzarufei means it could become osur. So you began your achila, and the Torah says that any achila that could mature to a full-fledged macholas asurus achila is prohibited. The Achiezer writes that there are two dinim. The derivation from kol chelev is going to include the isur of chatzi shir. But this isur, in and of itself, is what we call an isur stam. Stam meaning it's faceless, it's anonymous. And therefore, ha'ochel chatzi shir nevela eno nechshav lo iser nevela el iser stam mikra de kol chelev. If we only derive the iser of chatzi shir from kol chelev, then all it can produce for us is some sort of a stam iser, which is called chatzi shir. It doesn't have the specific name, nature, and category of that iser that it is half of the vela. But it's an Isur of Kol Chil. Aval mitzara svara. Now Rabbi Yochanan goes to stage number 2. He's not satisfied with Kol Chelev, and he adds this for Chazil Tzarufa Hainu dechashiv over al Isur nevela atzma. He is violating the Isur of nevela. See, what I don't understand is, according to the Achiezer, once we have Chazil Tzarufei, why do we need Kol Chelev? In any event, Nafkamina le'inyan Yom HaKippurim, Shatzivui hulis anos, to mishum Kol Chelev, Gama ochel chatzi shir over al Isur. Here's the answer to my question. Aval lo ma'ani asfar shel Chazil Tzarufei lahachshiv she'over al mitzvahs inui, the efshar lomar she'over bitel etzav mitzvahs ha'inui kevin shebechatzi shir adayin lomas yasheves daitu. He means the following: that if we only had this far of Chazil Tzarufei, we would not be able to apply that svara to the case of Yom HaKippurim, when the Torah commands you to fast. Why wouldn't Chazil Tzarufei, according to the Achiezer, apply to Yom Kippur? Because the whole purpose of Chazil Tzarufei is to create that shame Isur. And that shame Isur is Inui. But if he eats half of a shear, a half a Koseves Agasa, then he doesn't get to Yishuv Adas. And there's no half of an Isur over here. But for that, I need Kol Chelev. And Kol Chelev is going to introduce Chatzi Shir on Yom HaKippur. See, if I only had Kol Chelev, I would have come to the conclusion that he eats half of the Nevela, half of the Nevela. He's not eating the Nevela, he's not in violation of the Nevela. And therefore I need Chazil Tzarufei to tell me that it's Osir Machmas, Oso Shem Atzmo, and it's an Isur of Nevela when he eats Chatzi Shir Nevela. If I only had the Chazil Tzarufei, I would not know that this halach of Chatzi Shir Osir in the Torah applies even to Yom HaKippurim, because there in Yom HaKippurim, the goal is to create a state of Inui, and not to do anything, any kind of an achilu that'll bring you to Yeshiva Das. But that only applies in the case of a sheep. Wow. This reminds me of a story I told here on Shabbos. I gave a little bit of a shir here on Shabbos afternoon about Nesias Kapayim, Duchanin, because it was in last week's Parashas Nasa. So I told the story. The Chafetz Chaim, was a Kohen. And one time he had an occasion that the Achiezer was in town, and he was sitting there in the Tzibur when the Chafetz Chaim got up to, I guess it was on Yom Tov, and the Chafetz Chaim got up to be Nose's Kappa. And the Chafetz Chaim was gripped by fear. I'm going to give a bracha to the Gadol Ador of Chaim Ozer Brzezinski, the Achiezer that was studying here. So the Achiezer is a heavy hitter, and this is what we're seeing here. 2 dimensions. The Chatzi Shir Asim in the Torah Kotav Yochanan, one derived from the pasuk called Chelev, and the other from the Svara of Chazil Itztaruf. What is Chazil Itztaruf? L'das Hatzlach, the Noda Yehuda. We're afraid that if we allow you, the Torah is afraid, that if we allow you to eat a half a zayis of nevela, you'll end up eating a full zayis of nevela. Like I say, give you a little schnapps, right? I start with a little schnapps, and then before you know it, lefizeh, im ochal chatzi shir, let's say he eats a half a zayis of chametz on Pesach. Bisof yom zayin shel Pesach. Mamish, the last split second of Pesach, the ein od zman l'sayim achilas kizayis b'isur. According to the tzlach, if there's no way that he can be mashlim the shear and violate the isur with a full shear, then it's not chazil tzarufeh. V'chein b'yom kippurim samach l'chashecha. It's right before the end of Yom Kippurim. It's about to get dark. And he eats a half of a kosemes hagasa. Is b'chai gavna moder Rabbi Yochanan she'eno asur. It's not chazil tzarufeh. It's humanly impossible to be mashlim b'shir. L'fizeh, yesh l'taritz kushas hakesef mishal Rambam. The Rambam paskins in Perek Beis Milchus Shvisas also. The halacha ki Rabbi Yochanan the chatzi shir also in Torah, and yet in Hilchas Chametz, Perek Aleph halacha Daled, he writes that kol shu shel chametz also, and he derives it from a special pasuk, especially of lo ye'achel chametz. Why does the Rambam need that? I'm just trying to. This technology never works for me. Oh, guess what? It worked. Why does the Rambam have to tell me in Hilchos Chametz that if you eat a small parcel of chametz, you violate the Iser because of lo ye'achel chametz? That's Shir Asim in Torah. The Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yochanan. Says that Tzlach, the Rambam needs the pasuk in a case where he ate chatzi shir of chametz at the very end of Pesach in such a way that it's not chazil tzarufeh, and there's no way under the sun that he could possibly eat the other half zayis of chametz because it's a second before sunset. I would say the following, that this is against the Achiezer. Why? Because the Achiezer says that there are 2 dimensions of Chatzi Shir Kotav Yochanan. There's kol chelev and there's chazil tarufe. And in fact, the Achiezer claims that we could derive Chatzi Shir and Yom Kippur from Kol Chelev. So forget about Chazil Tzaruf. You're right, it's the last minute of Yom Tov. No way, no how is it physically possible that he could fit in another Ephesias before the end of Yom Tov. I still hold this also. Why? Because in addition to Chazil Tzaruf, Rabbi Yochanan invokes the pasuk, the drush of Kol Chelev, which tells you there's a separate Isur of Kol Chelev of Chatzi Shir. So it's not going to be the Isur Chatzi Shir of Chazil Tzarufe, but it'll be a Chatzi Shir of Kol Chelev. Now he quotes the Shagas Aryeh. The Yisod Adin Chatzi Shir Osam in Torah who Shem Yashlim Lebasov Hare Yitztaref Masha Ochal Achsho V'Nimtzol L'Mafreya Achilas Isur Hoysa Ulekach V'Asav Dilagavi Bal Yiroah Lo Shayach Din Chatzi Shir. I own half a zayis of chametz. Vayirah Motze is violated if I own a full zayis of chametz. Would Chatzi Shir Osam in a Torah apply to Vayirah? Says the Shagas Aryeh, absolutely not, because there's no Chazil Tzarufe vis-a-vis Bal Yirah. Because Chazil Tzarufe means that when he finishes the Shir, he L'Mafreya violated the Isur Achila of a full Shir. You cannot apply that principle to the case of Bal Yirah. Even if at the end he will purchase or inherit another Chatzi Zayis of Chametz, Eino Ose Isur L'Mafreya. You can't tell me that yesterday he owned a Zayis of Chametz. That's not true. He only owned a half a Zayis of Chametz. They don't buy into this. Why? Time of the crow. Lelech achar asvara ulahatir chatzi shir b'makom shemitzad asvara ein bo tam isur da sof sof mikra yalfina. So he is introducing the kol chelav, and he's saying you're working, operating with a svara, and you're going to say, well, chatzi shir is mutter at the end of the day, a minute before shkia, because it's not chazil tzarufe. But what about kol chelav? The od yesh lefakir al etzem yisod shetam chazil tzarufe mishum sheyochol ligmar v'yavel idei isur. Yesh lomar the misvara of chazil tzarufe hainu the keva the yashlim chayav al chayav al kochach the gama chatzi shir atzmo nechshav achilas isur im lokein boy chayav al chatzi hasheni kevin she'ein es harishon be'terah ka'ach. Not sure who's quoting here. You Dalit, does he tell you? Or Litzion. All right, the light of Zion. What does the Sarufet mean? Does it mean that he might actually eat the second half of the Zayis and therefore the Mafreya, his Achila was a full shear? Or does Chazil Tzarufe mean something else entirely? that if he would continue to eat a chatzi shir in addition to the first chatzi shir, be chayiv. Why? He started with a chatzi shir, and that's nothing. The answer is it can't be nothing. It must be that he started with an achila asura, even though he only ate a chatzi shir. He ate a chatzi shir because otherwise, what are you going to tell me that if he eats the rest of the kazayis, he's chayav? What do you mean? The first half of zayis was heter yom. The answer is it must be that the first half of zayis is isur. And if that be the case, it should apply even the last minute before the end of Pesach. Oof. Okay, Rabbi, so it's been a beautiful long week, but with a lot of work. We've accomplished, I think, a great deal. Let's just make a note of where we got up to here. And we'll talk a little bit next week in Mitzvah Shem about the Sugya of Koi. That's on page Samach. And we'll finish up here on the bottom of Nunches over to Nuntes with a discussion about Mushpa v'Omer Mar Sinai according to Rabbi Yom. So if by chance, Steve, you have a little time, I don't know if you're running, let me give you this. Everyone should have